you for tuning in to the Removing Barriers podcast. I'm Jay.
And I'm MCG.
And we're attempting to remove barriers so we can all have a clear view of the cross.
This is episode 202 of the Removing Barriers podcast. And this is the 13th in the series of This World Has Gone Bonkers. And in this episode, we have lined up a number of news articles that we think show that this world is bonkers.
Hi, this is Jay. MCG and I would like for you to help us remove barriers by going to removingbarriers.net and subscribing to receive all things Removing Barriers. If you'd like to take your efforts a bit further and help us keep the mics on, consider donating at removingbarriers.net/donate. Removing Barriers, a clear view of the cross.
All right, Jay, I'm going to start with the notorious David Hogg. You know, David Hogg, he's the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, and he's also a student survivor of the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in 2018. Well, he has now become an activist, of course, since then for gun control. Well, David Hogg was on a hidden camera by Project Veritas, and he has some things to say about Nancy Pelosi. Here is David Hogg.
Joining us now, DNC Vice Chair David Hogg.
We're not going to go after Pelosi.
And let me apologize for the music and stuff like that. This was in the original video that I couldn't take out.
One, we wouldn't beat her, even if we wanted to. That's part of it. But two, it's an unnecessary fight to take when there's other members that are far weaker. And I would say Pelosi's actually very good at her job. I don't agree with the stock trading stuff.
Or you don't?
No. Some of these members of Congress make trades that are like way too well timed to not have like insider knowledge about. So, and it's a huge problem.
Do you think that's how Pelosi is worth
Yes.
hundreds of millions of dollars?
Yes. I mean, she gets better returns than almost every hedge fund in this city. Every year.
And you don't think that has to change?
No, it does.
How would you change that?
You just ban members of Congress from owning stock.
So
Have to put their assets in a blind trust.
you're going to prop up candidates who oppose that? Is that your goal, to prop up candidates?
I mean, in part, yeah.
Yeah, because it's a long haul. There's 435 members.
Yeah.
And most likely 430 of them are doing the same thing, which is why they don't want to. I don't know, but I'm just stating.
I think it's a pretty good guess.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Just conveniently. They happen to be some of the best financial analysts in human history.
Have you spoken against that?
I've talked to that, but it's also like, I know that if I pick that fight, it's going to be harder for us to get gun control passed, so I have to pick my battle. Like, the hardest part about my job is I just want to burn everything down, because it's all so corrupt. But you got to pick your battles and slowly build your momentum.
So that was David Hogg. Let me say this. I don't think this is just a Nancy Pelosi issue. I think Republicans are guilty of this too. And for those, if you don't know, insider trading is actually illegal in the US. And that's when you have insider knowledge of what's going to happen to a company or whatever case might be that would affect their stocks. And you can either sell early or buy early to avoid losing money. And if you notice, a lot of Congress people, they go to join Congress, being normal people with normal net worth, and all of a sudden, 2-3 years in, they're millionaires. Now, Nancy Pelosi is worth, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars after spending her entire career in government. And David Hogg, the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, is saying, hey, yeah, we know that they do some of these things. It's obvious because their investments are just too good and no one is that good. But he said, well, we're going to have to allow it, quote unquote, paraphrasing him, so we can get gun control. So what does that remind you of? He kind of remind me of the decline in Joe Biden, the mental decline in Joe Biden. But we're going to prop him up because Trump is too bad to win, or whatever the case may be.
Well, didn't they say that outright? They said, Biden, all we need is your corporeal form. They actually did say that in an article. Go ahead.
To some degree, it's a dirty game of politics. Mm-hmm. And it's also interesting what you will catch someone say when they don't know they're being recorded. Here we go. We kind of already know it. We know these politicians have some kind of insider knowledge. At least that is my belief. And I don't think it's necessarily a Democrat issue. I think it's on all sides of the aisle that do it. But it's just interesting here because gun control is such a boogeyman, or Trump was such a boogeyman, that we're going to remove all ethics and all morals and whatever the case may be, so we can get all gun control, so Donald Trump doesn't go into office. This is dangerous precedent they're setting here, because then what else are you going to choose, which is the quote-unquote the lesser of the evil, so that this greater thing doesn't happen, which is, again, gun control or Second Amendment right, what the case may be. And I understand he was a victim of a brutal, well, I don't know if he was a victim, but he was a survivor. I don't know where in the building he was, even if he was at the building. He was a student at the school. I don't even know if he was at school that day. I don't know. I don't know what he saw, what he went through. If he did went through something, of course, my heart goes out to him. No one wants to witness anything like that or have friends that go through anything like that. But at any cost, David Hogg, at any cost to get your gun control. Anyways.
What is the normal penalty or punishment for insider trading? Does that include jail time?
I believe so, but I'm not 100% sure.
So, okay, they're all involved with insider trading. And we all know, like you said, MCG, it's not just Nancy Pelosi. If we threw them all in jail, then how would the Congress continue to function? Maybe that's what he's saying when he says, okay, you got to pick your battles. The bigger issue here is getting gun control passed. If the whole thing is so corrupt, maybe he sees it as a lost cause, and maybe that's why he's still playing ball, even though he knows that everyone in there is dirty.
Well, according to Doc AI, insider trading can result in severe penalties, including up to 20 years in prison and fines up to $5 million for individuals. Additionally, civil penalties can be imposed, which may account to 3 times the profit gain or loss avoided due to illegal trading. And that's according to Doc AI. So
one of the main reasons she is not going to pay for any of this and she's not going to be held accountable is because of who she is, the fact that she's a congresswoman, the fact that she has a lot of power and sway and influence in the Democratic Party.
Well, it's not just that.
Democrat Party.
The honest truth is, how do you prove it? So we can say it's obvious to us, but being obvious to us doesn't stand in court. So how do you prove, let's say she has insider knowledge of Apple, for example. How do we prove that? It would take maybe email correspondence between her and somebody in Apple that would be in the know. It would take someone to come and testify of that, and maybe more than one person. Or you may have to get her on tape saying it or something. It's a very hard crime to prove, especially with someone like that, because firstly, if Trump decides, hey, let's investigate Nancy Pelosi for inside trading, well, what is going to be? He's going to be dubbed as a political witch hunt. And if the other side does it, if when Biden was in there, he decided to investigate the Republicans for insider trading, the dirtiness of politics is just going to mess everything up. And everybody going to cry wolf and say, no, I'm not doing it. And the only reason they're investigating me because I'm a Democrat or because I'm a Republican. And of course, we know how much we can trust the FBI and the DOJ and all these people that.
Right.
So it's not just because of who she is. It's just harder to prove. And I guess who she is make it harder to prove too, because she have her loyal people not going to spill anything. So,
well, I'm sure she's significantly connected as well. She's well connected. She's on all of these different committees and subcommittees in Congress that would allow her that kind of access, but it allows her also to make a lot of connections with really powerful people. And so even if you wanted to prosecute, even if you wanted to investigate, you wouldn't be able to. Like, one of the most important committee assignments is the Appropriations Committee. Doesn't the Appropriations Committee determine, I don't want to speak out of turn, but it seems like they determine who gets what money.
Well, the thing
is, appropriation bills along with its Senate counterpart. This is according to Wikipedia. The bills passed by the Appropriations Committee regulate the expenditures of money by the government of the United States. One of the, if not the most important committee. But she didn't just serve on the committee. She was like she was a leader in that committee. Here, let's go back to Wikipedia, see what it says here. Of course, take everything Wikipedia says with a grain of salt, but it says here, in the House, she served as the Appropriations and Intelligence and the Intelligence Committee, and she was the ranking member on the latter until her election as minority leader. She was a member of the House Baltic Caucus and the Congressional Equality Caucus. So Even if they know that she's dirty, no one's going to mess with Nancy Pelosi. And so that in itself is the evil, where you know something is wrong and you know someone is dirty, but you refuse to say anything because the price is too steep.
Yeah, probably, most likely that. But I think also David Hogg mentioned how to prevent it is by putting their assets in a blind trust. I guess that
Whose assets? The representative?
Once you become a member of Congress or president or whatever, put your assets in a blind trust so you don't know what assets you have in your investments. And I guess that could work, but I think a better scenario would be it's term limits. Nancy Pelosi is what, 82 or something like that? She's definitely in her 80s. And she has been in Congress for 40 plus years, I would guess, if you could double check me on that.
Yeah, she is 85.
85. And how long has she been in Congress?
She has been in Congress since
79 or something like that?
A little bit before that, it looks like. Well, she started... Sorry, let me look here. Her rap sheet is so long here. Let me see. Not rap sheet. I probably shouldn't say that about our representatives, but looks like the earliest date here is 63? No.
Maybe that's local. 63 would be local. Maybe local California
perhaps.
Stuff.
Yeah, so around the 70s, it looks like 87, it looks like.
Okay.
She started.
And that's what? Almost 40 years, 38 years, somewhere around like that?
More than.
38 years. If it's 87, it's 38 years.
Yeah. You're right.
So, yeah, term limits. So, yeah, the blind trust, but also term limits. This will prevent all this nonsense because then that access is removed and whatever the case may be. And still, they have their prestige of being a former member of Congress and they can get a big board seat someplace and make a lot of money still, but at least they won't be doing it on the taxpayers' dime. But anyways, what's your first article?
If I could just put one more thought on that, I think that we're beginning to see maybe people who are listening to this podcast are much wiser. They've seen more things than us, more vital than we are. And so they've seen corruption many decades prior to this. But at least in my lifetime, it's amazing how we are seeing the corruption in our government institutions, how deep it actually goes. They don't call it the swamp for nothing. And the whole idea of draining the swamp, it's a beautiful idea. But when you see how deep the corruption goes, you wonder if the people who want to burn it all down actually have a point. Just burn it all down and start over. Of course, that means revolution, and that's never a wonderful thing. But I'm not excusing what David Hogg said, but I sort of kind of understand it. If your sole desire and focus in life is to get this one thing passed, for him it's gun control, then you probably won't quibble and quabble about these other little things that you deem are not
No,
as
I don't give
important.
him a pass because...
No, I'm not giving him a pass either. I'm just saying I understand.
In my mind, I hate to get this graphic, but in my mind it's like this. I want to catch the murderer so bad that I'm going to give a wink and a nod to the rapist. No. No. In my mind, that's what it is. Gun control is so important that I'm going to give a wink and a nod to something that he finds to be obvious. Again, maybe he can't prove it. Again, maybe
Even
he can.
in his own words, he said it was a huge problem. So it's not just her. It's pretty much everyone in Congress.
I believe so. Maybe not everybody, but...
Yeah, the only two that I would say for
95%, 99% probably.
Yeah. If you tell me Matt Gaetz, I don't even think he's... But folks like Thomas Massey as well, I don't think I would ever see them doing something that crazy, but pretty much everyone else.
Yeah, I don't put anything past the human nature, but go ahead.
Okay, I got an article here from the New York Post. It says here, female activist arrested for tearing down U.S. flag, replacing with Mexico's flag at a California park, shouting, "This is Mexican land," and then there's an expletive there. A female activist threatened park rangers in a profanity-laced fury as they took her into custody for allegedly tearing down an American flag and replacing it with a Mexican one at a California park, body cam footage shows. Crystal Aguilar, 24, was arrested on Thursday for slashing a chain that secured the flagpole located at Hart Park in Bakersfield before throwing the U.S. flag in the mud and raising Mexico's national banner in its place, according to the Kern County Sheriff's Office. "You're not going to tell me what to do. This is Mexican land," and there's an expletive there. She screamed that as 3 park rangers approached her, the footage shows. She allegedly resisted arrest, with the rangers holding her down as she repeatedly threatened to have them and their families killed. "Touch me," expletive, and "when your kids die," and then she goes on to talk about how she's Mexican, she's Aztec, and that they're going to pay, just making threats to these rangers and their families. And this is all according to the body cam footage of the officer. And Aguilar demanded the deputies turn off her car before telling them to get off her land. "I'm going to let my father kill you," she hollered twice. Deputies responded to the park around 9:36 a.m. after receiving multiple reports of someone trying to steal the Stars and Stripes. Park rangers then found the woman's white sedan sitting in the muddy grass at the park's entrance as she wrestled with the flags. She did whatever she was doing with the flags. Aguilar, who is known as an immigrant rights activist in Kern County, recently protested the ICE raids in her community, citing her Mexican parents were deported when she was a kid. She is booked at the Ledro jail and charged with threatening a police officer, vandalism, resisting arrest, trespassing, and marijuana possession. She's due back in court as of a week of the publishing of this article. So this is a crazy article, bonkers, because the idea that you would well, I suppose it's not so bonkers because we've seen people tear down the American flag, burn it, step on it. We've seen them replace the flag at certain buildings with the LGBTQIA alphabet flag. We've seen them replace it with BLM contraband. And so perhaps it's not quite that bonkers in the sense that we haven't seen this kind of thing before, but it is bonkers that you would be in someone's country and tear down the flag to put up another nation's flag and yell all of these different things, calling on ancient people groups. She mentioned the Aztec and other people group as though that were some sort of justification for her behavior, which that is bonkers. The fact that you're an immigrants' rights activist, that's bonkers. You see, if you were to tell me that you are an immigrants' rights activist and what you do is that you make sure that you're not treated hatefully because you're a certain, you're part of a certain people group, or you're not mistreated by the government because you're not a citizen and so they shouldn't treat you as though you don't have rights, I can understand that. But we all know that when she says that she's an immigrants' rights activist, what she's really saying is that there should be no borders. This is stolen land anyway, and these people deserve to be here. And so you need to cough up all of your reparations and all of your government assistance and cough up money to have these people settle here, even though they are not citizens and even though they are in the nation illegally, which is bonkers. You can't have a country without borders. And so this idea that she would threaten rangers, I don't know if these are
Park rangers.
Park rangers. So yeah, they are. Well, that's a good question. I should find out if they fall under actual police officers.
They have arrest powers within
the park.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Then, yeah, that's a person of authority. That's a police officer to threaten not just them, but their families as well, swear at them and do all kind of escalating behavior. That's just bonkers. But she's 24. So what is that? That's Gen Alpha, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that's Gen Z.
That's Gen Z? Oh, okay.
Gen Alpha is teenagers and below.
They're teenagers right now? Okay. So
and below, even all the way down to like 2.
Oh, I didn't realize that's where the lines fell. Okay, my bad. All right. But even so, the generations that are coming up, it seems to me, and I could be wrong about this, I hope I'm wrong about this, this is a normal way of thinking. This idea that there should be no borders, that we're a racist country anyway, and this is all stolen land, and...
No, it's just
Or is it just her? Is it just her?
Mind virus. It's just a woke mind virus.
Which is dying out, which I pray continues to die out. But the idea that someone actually thinks and behaves that way is bonkers.
Well, I don't know if it's dying out, but a couple of things that stood out to me. One is, all right, you feel a certain way about the U.S. and about the stolen land. You live in a border state. Walk across the border. Go to Mexico. No discrimination. Nothing. Go back. Why are you staying? I assume you were born here because your parents were deported and you are still here. So I assume she was born here. So she's an anchor baby then. Right. Okay. Or a U.S. citizen of that sort. Mm-hmm. But whatever the case may be, go back. You're in a border state. If you were living in New York or some one of these states that are on the northern border, and you don't have the money to fly down to Mexico, I can understand, but you live in California. You can even probably hitchhike to Mexico if you want to from California, especially from LA. I'm sure there are a lot of people leaving LA going to Mexico. So, and then everything you said, I'm an immigrant. I did everything the illegal way, but I'm not going to come and start decimating people's flag and all that stuff because of what the case may be. It's crazy to think that, you can come to someone's country and make demands of them.
Does her behavior fall under the banner of freedom of expression, freedom of speech?
It does.
Freedom of association?
To some degree, but she don't have a right to take down the flag and put up the Mexico flag. There has to be some kind of crime there. But other than that, she can march in the street and claim that this is Mexico land all she want, or she can wave the Mexico flag as long as she want. I don't think that's the issue. I think what was their charges? Resistance arrest and all that.
Threatening an officer.
They didn't charge her for her expression because that.
Yeah.
But anyways, many things there. But my overall takeaway is let's go to Mexico.
Christians ought to look at this and realize, though, that, you and I, we are at the door witnessing on a weekly basis. You go many times more in the week than I do. And the people that we're going to encounter today, I mean, it's a different bowl of soup. It's a different sauce out there. The explosion of recreational and illicit drug use, the increase in the abuse of prescription drugs, the increase in the participation with, all kinds of things that we don't even know how it affects young people's brains, mushrooms and psychedelics and all these different things, coupled with the effects of social media, coupled with the lack of education provided to these kids. I'm certain she's publicly educated. We talk about this all the time when we interview missionaries, asking them about the difference in culture. Is it an Acts chapter 2 or Acts chapter 17 culture? America's already there. This is an Acts 17 culture through and through and through and through. People who don't have...
Well, in the cities, in the New Yorks and the East Coast and West Coast, the Californians and the New Yorks and stuff like that. But in the middle of the country, I don't think so. At least I don't think it's fully matured in the middle of the country and the Bible Belt area, stuff like that. I can't imagine going into rural Virginia and rural Kentucky and stuff like that, and people are this crazy in their thinking. I don't think so. So, yes, and unfortunately, whatever happens, he's going to go back. After all, Kamala Harris said that they don't even have, what was it, Kinko's or something like that?
The copy machine company?
So they can't get a driver's license.
So
anyways.
Awful the way they think. All I'm saying is, though, in today's world, the likelihood of you running into someone that has such a detachment from reality, the likelihood has increased.
Oh, yeah.
And so perhaps as Christians, we need to be thinking about, okay, how to engage someone when the fundamentals, the rules of reality are not even there. They're not in play. And that's going to affect how we present the gospel to them. They're not going to understand Jesus loves you and has a plan for your life. For her to even think, and of course, we've covered a lot of different things on this podcast that are bonkers, but for her to even be in that frame of mind, there's a lot going on there, not just emotionally, but intellectually, spiritually. There's a degradation.
The victim mentality is the intersectionality of things.
That really needs to be addressed.
To look at herself as being black or brown person, I'm assuming, since she says she's Mexican, black or brown, and she
went back to Aztec.
And she's a female and stuff like that, so she's kind of down the rung of the hegemonic power. So it's all that, and it's probably the colleges as well, but yeah, that would be my take.
All
right, so the state of Maryland and Senate Bill 292. Here is a sheriff, and here is what the bill is all about. I'll let the sheriff tell you, and then I'm going to read a summary of it.
Well, we're just 2 weeks into this year's legislative session, and already we're seeing some of the bills, and there is a bill that, of course, makes me scratch my head and say, I wonder what they're thinking. In this bill, wait a minute, I think we'll just show you the video. Check out the video.
Sarge, that guy's driving with no headlights.
Yeah, I see him. Hope he can see where he's going.
Sarge, did you see that? He made an illegal U-turn right in front of us. We have to stop that car.
Wow, you're right. Illegal U-turn, and he almost hit that guy. Hope everybody's all right.
Sarge, did you hear that? There was an insanely loud noise coming from that vehicle.
Yeah, I can hear it. Oh, that dirty litter bug. What is he thinking?
You want to know why Sergeant Eaton couldn't pull me over for all those offenses you just saw there? Well, it's right here. If Senate Bill 292 were to pass in this year's General Assembly session, law enforcement officers in Maryland could not pull you over as a primary offense for expired registration, driving without headlights, making illegal U-turns, driving illegally in a busway, excessive noise coming from your vehicle. And, as you just saw, I can throw all my trash out the car window and litter our roadways in Maryland, and you guessed it, a police officer can't pull me over as a primary offense for that.
Well, I guess I can clean up after him.
Senate Bill 292 has a hearing tomorrow at 1 p.m. in Annapolis. And if this bill were to pass, all these offenses you just saw and more would become a secondary offense, meaning our police officers cannot stop people for committing those violations of law. Not only is that not far enough, but this bill sponsor went the additional measure to make sure that it's pointed out that if a police officer mistakenly pulls someone over, that officer is subject to administrative discipline. You really cannot make this stuff up.
All right, so I have a little bit to say about this. So the list of secondary offenses would be expired registration, driving without headlights, illegal U-turns, driving illegally in a bus lane, and excessive noise coming from your vehicle. And I think there's more. I'm going to read a summary of the bill so that I don't have to read the entire bill. This bill introduces significant changes to traffic stop procedures and enforcement in Maryland, primarily focusing on limiting police officers' ability to initiate stops for certain minor infractions. The bill requires police officers to document all reasons for a traffic stop, display proper identification, and provide specific information of individuals being stopped, including the officer's name, identification number, agency, and the reason for the stop. Most critically, the bill mandates that many vehicle-related violations, such as expired registration, windows tinting, missing mirrors, and equipment issues, can only be enforced as a secondary action, meaning an officer can only address these violations if they have already stopped the driver for another primary violation. If an officer fails to follow these secondary enforcement rules, any evidence obtained may be inadmissible in court, and the officer may face administrative disciplinary action. Additionally, the bill prohibits officers from preventing citizens from recording their actions during a stop, provided the citizen is acting lawfully and safely. The new regulation aims to reduce what some view as pretextual traffic stops and increase transparency in law enforcement interactions. So I have a little bit of mixed feeling about it.
Before you share your feelings, I just want to be clear. It seems like this bill simply requires police officers to document the reason for a traffic stop or other citation resulting from the stop, and that if there is a secondary reason, a secondary action, then they can only do it as a result of having initially pulled them over for, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
No, the officer cannot stop them for stuff like, let's say their registration expired. After October 1, officer can't say, oh, you're driving under expired registration. I'm going to stop you, pull you over. You can't pull them over for not having the headlights on or blown out headlights. They can't pull them over for illegal U-turns. They can't pull them over for driving the bus lane. They can't pull them over for excessive noise coming from the vehicle. So they can't say, hey, you made an illegal U-turn, I'm going to pull you over. If they stop you from some other reason, which is a primary reason, let's say speeding was not mentioned. So let's say they pull you over for going, 50 in a 35. And then they notice the headlights are out. And then they notice you have expired registration. They can add that on to the ticket that you get or whatever the case may be. But they can't pull you over for those offenses as a primary reason.
I'm just not seeing that in the bill. That's why I'm a little bit confused.
No, it's in there.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
But the important thing here is that I remember when we were doing our Black Lives Matter series and stuff like that, and one of the complaints has always been, okay, police are targeting Black people for excessive reasons and whatever the case may be. And the politicians were blaming it on the police. The police are racially profiling people. The police are using excessive force and all that stuff. Well, we know that a lot of the contact a police officer have with citizens is actually while they're driving. It's a traffic stop. Usually it's a traffic stop. And usually it's for stuff like your brake lights are out, your indicator's not working, headlights are out, whatever the case may be. And I remember saying, hey, this is not on the officers, this is not on the legislature, because they can change the law. So they can say, hey, officers no longer pull over someone if they have expired registration. Because what will happen, you have an expired registration, you get pulled over, the officer claims he smelled weed coming from the vehicle.
Right.
He called a canine unit, the canine unit hit. Now the officer have reasons to search. He search, he find drugs, he find a gun illegally or whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden, in cuffs, you're going to jail, right? And if you decide to resist, then you provide more issues there. They're going to chase you. And if you have something that look like a gun, they might end up and shoot you, blah, blah, blah. So now Maryland is saying, hey, officers, for these petty crimes, you no longer can just see someone, oh, the person driving with expired tags, I'm going to pull him over. Can't pull him over for that anymore. I remember when I went on my police ride along, we did a pretextual stop. We actually sat in the car and wait for someone to leave just to pull them over. And the reason we pulled them over was for something else. But we used a traffic stop to do it. But on the police side, though, you have to see where they're coming from, because most of the time, these are how they take criminals off the streets. So you're drastically limiting the hands of the officers from actually doing their job, because now, to me, there are going to be more criminals on the street, because now, what will stop me from never registering my car again? Because if I'm not speeding, or if I'm not doing any other traffic violation that will cause you to pull me over, now you can't pull me over. So basically, they can lose a lot of money there for people not registering their vehicles. I guess if they come over in a different state, I guess then, but at least in the state of Maryland, they can do whatever they want there. And also the sovereign citizens that never register their vehicles, they have a free pass now. So I don't know. I think it's a bit bonkers that you will limit the officers like that. But I can see some groups and some organization might say, you know what, it's about time, because we are tired of being pulled over for nonsense. And I'm saying nonsense because they will call it nonsense, not that I am calling it nonsense. I think you should follow the law, register your vehicles, and do whatever the case may be. But
are they trying to resolve the issue that some people run into where they have some sort of minor issue, like blown taillight, or registration is expired? And so in an effort to get to the county, they go through several different counties and get hit by officers for the same thing as they go through each county. Let's say a $10 problem becomes a $1,000 problem. Is that what they're trying to address?
No, because if you get pulled over twice for the same thing, you probably have some kind of warning or something. Even let's say you didn't even get a ticket, you have some kind of warning or something. You can say, hey, I got pulled over by this county already, and whatever case may be. Police officers are not going to say, oh, well, if you have a ticket already for the same thing, they usually will give you a period of time to fix it. So if you have the ticket, and it should be in the system as well, too. So if you have the ticket, the police officer, okay, this person was already pulled over for this. They're within the 30 days of fixing it. They can move on. So I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is more what I said. It's more the fact that a lot of the contact police officers have with citizens is through some sort of traffic violation. And they're saying, hey, if we pull back on that, we will limit the number of stuff. Maryland is not the only state that have done something like this. Virginia, I think, did something like that as well, where you can't, I don't know exactly what Virginia did, but I think it has something to do with vehicle registration, or I think it might be indicator lights or something, that you can't pull them over if you indicator light is out or something. Minor traffic violation, they call them. But I think I'm somewhat on the side of the police officers here, saying, hey, the more violent criminals you can get off the street, and if it's true traffic stuff, you get them off the street, so be it. But I can see the politicians are now taking the matter in their hand and say, hey, we're the one with the power. We're the one who can tell the police what to do. At least I don't want to see the police being blamed for any nonsense anymore. Because the police were being blamed for BLM and all these things when, this person got pulled over for minor traffic violation and then all of a sudden get shot. Okay, now they can't pull them over to minor traffic violation in Maryland anymore. Let's see what happened. Let's see what happened in the next couple of years in the state of Maryland. Let's see if crime went up or crime goes down because of this bill.
I was going to say that, they say that two of the most dangerous tasks that police officers have to carry out on a daily basis are domestic violence calls and traffic stops. And so maybe this is a measure to protect the police officers. If they don't have to pull the citizenry over for these so-called minor things, maybe it'll turn out to be a good thing. We'll have to revisit this in a year or two, because then the citizenry won't feel like, the population won't feel like they're being harassed by officers for minor things. And police officers won't have to pull people over and be put in these dangerous situations as much anymore.
Then more criminals fall through the crack. At least in my head, that's what's going to happen. Anyways, you're listening to Remove Embarrassed Podcast. We are in the middle of another Bonkers episode. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for a consistent and reliable place to get all your Christian materials? Try ChristianBook.com. Started from humble beginnings in 1978, ChristianBook.com now offers a wide range of books, CDs, DVDs, homeschooling, and church supplies, plus more. So whether you are a parent, a homeschooler, a pastor, or a layperson, ChristianBook.com can be a one-stop shop for all your needs. Click the link in the description section below and check out the vast array of Christian materials ChristianBook.com has to offer.
All right. Well, Jay, what's your second article, I guess?
Second article. Yep. Second article here is from the New York Post as well. Washington State Mayor destroys LGBTQ plus activists who complained about City Hall flying POW MIA flag, prisoner of war / missing in action flag. So this probably goes hand in hand with the last article with issues with flags and what flags can be flown where. A Washington State mayor scolded an LGBTQ plus activist who was outraged that the prisoner of war / missing in action flag was allowed to fly over City Hall, but the pride flag was not. Okay, I was going to say something, but I'll just come back to it. How do you even put those two on the same level? But okay. Newcastle Mayor Robert Clark was berated by activists at a public hearing Tuesday night as citizens of the city, about 12 miles from Seattle, were upset over the council's decision last year to stop the pride flag from being flown at City Hall during Pride Month. Toward the end of the 3-hour session, an activist stood in front of the council and called Clark, quote, disgusting, and claimed he and some of the elected city officials were trying to, quote, trick people out of believing the pride flag can't be flown by flying the prisoner of war missing in action flag. There are 82,000 Americans registered as POWs and MIAs, but there's 20 million minimum LGBTQ members, the activist said. I've talked before about the hypocrisy, and I think that your approach to trying to trick people out of having to fly the pride flag in June by making sure that the POW MIA flag was flown is really disgusting. This is the activist speaking. She then told Clark and the city council that they should be ashamed of the decision. As she walked away from the podium, her comments sparked a fire inside Clark, who immediately called her out for suggesting that the city was using the flag as a political stunt. And this is him speaking. He said, it's not common that I respond to public comment, but I will not sit here and have somebody tell me that veterans are a political stunt. How dare you, the mayor declared. The country was founded because veterans lost their lives. Hundreds of thousands of people died for this country so you could fly your pride flag. Man, I am... And he used a not so friendly word to describe how angry he is. Clark then told the woman to never disparage veterans in his presence again. Those 82,000 people who never came home will never have a chance to have a family or grow up while you can fly your pride flag. They sacrificed their lives all over the world for America and for freedom around the world, he said. The outraged mayor told the activists that he tolerated her comments in person and on Facebook in the past, claiming they were always on the attack and libelous, as he delivered a stern message to the group. You probably can't help yourself, but don't you ever disparage veterans in front of me, Clark reiterated, as it appeared that she or someone in the crowd tried to respond. And to shut them up, he was like, we're done. And he moved on to the next speaker. And so the fact that they would even put those two flags on the same level, again, we're talking about people who have lost touch with reality, who have lost their minds. We know this is a bonkers episode. These people are bonkers. I think it's absolutely crazy. We walked into a store that actually had the table set for prisoners of war and those that are missing in action. And it's a small thing that a nation can do to constantly keep in our memory those men and women that did what their country asked them to do and never came home. Some of them never came home, and some of them were held as prisoners on foreign soil. So it's a small thing to fly a flag or to set that extra seat, that extra table there to remember them. Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, all of these things. Every country has these things to remember people who sacrificed and in many instances paid the ultimate price. So I'm not sure I understand what the activist point is, because the flag, the LGBTQIA plus flag, represents spiritually and socially detrimental behavior. It's a whole identity based on sexual perversion. How is that any way comparable to a flag honoring prisoners of war and those that are missing in action who have never returned home?
But the question is, why wouldn't they think that the LGBTQIA plus flag is on par or even above the prisoner of war flag? Why would they not think that?
Why would they not think that? You mean considering how the nation practically went belly up for a while there, lost their minds before?
I think the nation is still belly up, but maybe a little bit better on the Trump, but
perhaps
it's still belly up because, again, my point is this. Is the prisoner of war flag being flown at the White House? I don't know if it is. It is. Okay.
I would be floored and flabbergasted if it isn't. And actually, I should say, as I'm scrolling through the article here, there is a picture of the flag being flown over the White House right now. So, okay.
Well, I guess my point is this. When you have been flying the LGBTQIA flag at the White House and at the Capitol building and at embassies all around the world, and all of a sudden now you remove it and you just have the prisoner of war flag, I can understand why they're outraged, because for years we have been telling them, I guess, that their flag is as important, not just as the prisoner of war flag, but almost as equal as the U.S. flag.
Yeah. If not superior to it. If these people would have their way, they would fly it,
So that's the issue there, is the outrageous acceptance of it. I said before, one time they were asking for tolerance. When they got it, they asked for acceptance. When they got it, they asked for preeminence.
Preeminence, right.
And now that's where we're at.
Yeah. See, this is how detached these people are from reality. No one agrees with them anymore. I just read an article, actually, that I probably should have brought up in connection to this article, how major brands are pulling back from supporting LGBTQ pride events and those kinds of things now because they know that the nation, the silent majority, is speaking up now. The overwhelming majority of America doesn't agree with the aggressive pushing of this agenda, of this ideology. Her language there, she said, I've talked about the hypocrisy. I think that your approach... No, that's not the one. I'm sorry. Let me pull it up here. Something about having to fly the pride flag. Something like you have to fly the pride flag during Pride Month is really disgusting. And I'm thinking, we don't have to do anything for your ideology. You're not entitled to flying your disgusting flag on any government property for any reason. And the fact that you think that you're entitled to that, that your kin feel like they're entitled to that, is bonkers. We don't agree with you.
Well, as I said, these people have gotten their way. And quite honestly, I think the retailers, it's not that they agree, it's that they are watching their bottom line. And I guess at this point with Trump in office and the country seem like at least somewhat leaning on Republican values, I guess, they acquiesce. But in a couple of years and a Democratic president go in 2029, when the next president is sworn in, and if it's not someone that will continue the current administration values, it's going to just swing all the way back. I'm not convinced that any true change will happen, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. Corporate folks are going to do what's good for corporate. And right now, it's just not, there's been quite a bit of backlash, particularly in the culture war against Pride. And so they're not going to. This is from CNN not too long ago. For the last several years, Pride Month was a splashy marketing event for big brands. But this Pride Month, that is this year, 2025, many retail chains are going to go quiet. And this has actually been happening for a long time. I walked into a local Target just because we got gift cards from there. And all of the crazy stuff that had me pull away from Target years ago, they're all gone. Target's almost back to normal now. And I agree with you that this has to be a spiritual and cultural, like a personal change in the country for this change to stick. Because if it's just corporations doing what is financially expedient, then it's not going to, it's only a temporary change. It's not going to last. But it says here that companies are treading lightly, avoiding prominent campaigns and visible public support. 39% say they plan to scale back Pride Month engagements this year. And that's a survey of more than 200 corporate executives done by Gravity Research, or Risk Management Advisory. This includes sponsoring Pride events, posting supportive messages about LGBTQ rights, which you don't have any, but whatever, on social media, and the selling of Pride-themed merchandise. So it's not just those things. They're pulling back on all of that sort of thing. They are wary of provoking right-wing customers and activists. And I think this is a correction, because what happened with Bud Light and the whole Dylan Mulvaney situation will probably be taught in business schools for the next however many decades, centuries, because it's so rare to see a company tumble so far down, lose so much market share, have such a terrible PR disaster on their hands as a result of one person, one ideology that they decided to go full on for, and to have to pay such a heavy financial price. And so I think corporations looked at that as a cautionary tale, and they're doing what's best for them, for the bottom line. And that's great. That's a start, but it's not enough. It's kind of like Trump going in there and just kind of correcting everything by executive order. It's not going to stick unless Congress gets in there and passes some laws to enshrine what he's been trying to do to put it into law, to pass laws in order for that to be the reality. But the idea somehow that, we're obligated to fly pride flags and we're obligated to do this, obligated to do that. You're right. Why wouldn't they think that? As you said before, why wouldn't they think that? And I think it's high time that, and I'm grateful for the people that are doing this, stand up and say, hey, no more. That's it. That's enough. We're not going along with your delusion any longer. Thus saith the Lord. Sit down and be quiet. I really think that's what needs to happen here, because she felt comfortable enough to stand up and berate mayors and other council members as though you have to do this, which shows just the bubble and the la-la land these people are living in.
Well, yeah, but I think Bud Light issue was that they didn't realize they weren't Apple or Walmart or something. So, But anyways.
Okay, yours?
My next article, and parents, this one might be a little bit too much for young ears, but be warned. New York dad killed his pregnant wife and stabbed his 2 young daughters because he wanted a son.
Oh, I can't engage with this. Oh, man.
All right. An upstate New York dad fatally stabbed his pregnant wife and then tried to kill his 2 young daughters just because he was angry he wasn't going to have a son, according to the slain woman's father. Drew Gardiner, and I think I'm saying it incorrectly because it's French, 33, admitted to repeatedly stabbing his 5 months pregnant wife, Samantha Gardner, 29, and their children, Izzy, 6, and Adelina, 9, in the bloodbath at the family's home in Masonville on September 4th last year. That will be 2024, according to the Delaware County District Attorney's Office. His wife and the unborn child both died in the attack, which was just weeks before the mom was to turn 30. The young girls are recovering from significant injuries, the DA said. Gardner killed in anger that his wife was again pregnant with a girl. Samantha's grieving father, guess that is Gregory Vernagallo, said in a victim impact statement at sentencing he wanted a boy. Gardner pleaded guilty last month to first-degree manslaughter and 2 counts of first-degree assault, both Class B violent felonies. He was sentenced last week to 30 years in prison with 15 years post-release supervision as part of the plea deal, amended to protecting the surviving daughters from the trauma of a child. We were able to secure the conviction without forcing young children to testify about the horrific things they witnessed, District Attorney Sean Smith said of the sentence being lighter than he wanted. The killer dad was also forbidden from seeing his daughters until 2056, the maximum allowed, which only the girls can overrule if they eventually want contact. You took a life and injured your children. They had the right to expect protection from you. Judge John Hubbard told the dad of the decades-long no-contact order. Samantha Gardner was due to give birth in February, which will be February 2025. Her daughters are still recovering from their injuries and have been adopted by their maternal grandfather. I am their father now, Gallo said at the sentences. I will protect them, according to their grandfather. So, of course, this is a heinous crime and everything, and this guy probably didn't do intro to biology. So, not realizing that he's the one who contributes and somewhat determined. Well, that's not true. To be fair, if I'm going to talk about basic biology, it's random. So about 50% of their male gamete would be X, and about 50% of it will be Y. And it's a race to the finish, it's a random. So I guess his X's are just a little bit faster than his Y's. So maybe he didn't do basic biology, but to take it this far, because to some degree, it's going to sound weird, but to some degree, I've always wanted a girl. And I have 4 boys. And they're not the girl that I was looking for. But I have no plan to kill them and kill nobody because I got 4 boys. I love them and take care of them and they grow up and maybe they'll have some granddaughters. Who knows? But this is just well beyond I would like to have a boy or I would like to have a girl. It's ridiculous.
Oh my goodness.
Anyways.
I can't even... What do I even say to that? That's just heinous and evil. Why was he only charged with manslaughter?
He wasn't charged with manslaughter. The reason why the sentencing was like that, as the author explained, is because in order to convict him of anything more, or at least to go to trial, his daughters are the witness.
They don't want to put the daughters on the stand and re-victimize them.
The kids do.
Okay, so. I think I understand that now. Man, I don't even know what to say to that. My goodness.
Yeah, I want to say it's a step higher, but it's many, many step higher of what would you like to have? Oh, I like to have a girl. I would like to have a boy. You know? everybody kind of, at least sane people, like, but if you get the opposite of what you want, everybody kind of like, okay, well, it's my kid. I'll love the kid and take care of the kid as much as. It blow my mind that he will actually go to that level. Maybe he's thinking, okay, I have 2, and hopefully get a boy. And maybe they already said, after this, we're not going to have any more. And he felt, okay, I'm going to be stuck with 3 girls. If he had known me, he could have asked me for a swap.
Can I go back to this whole manslaughter thing? I understand that they don't want to put the children through the trauma of having to be a witness. And I agree with that. But
did the article say manslaughter?
Yeah, the article said first-degree manslaughter. But why would they even need the daughters to testify, especially with the mountain of evidence against him?
Well, I don't know if there's mountain of evidence against him. I don't know what the evidence against him. He went into plea deal. But remember, there's a different level of proof in court. So I guess they figure in order for them to prove he did what he did, of course, they can't force him to testify against himself. Who witnessed what he did? The girls. I don't know. I'm no lawyer, but I guess.
So in a situation like that, in order to prove culpability for murder, you need testimony? That's what I'm getting at?
I guess.
Like the evidence is not enough?
I guess he just had a good defense lawyer that say, hey, we will go into a plea deal if you stuff. And the prosecution was kind of like, well, let's do it so we don't traumatize the girls anymore.
I understand.
So I don't know.
Awful.
I think the sentence is a little bit light, 30 years. And then I think
15 years probation after that.
I
can't.
I don't know, but whatever the case may be. But yeah, it's one of those.
Bonkers.
I don't even know what to say here because, as I said, this is just a completely different level of wanting a girl or a boy. Completely different level.
There had to have been something else. There had to have been some argument or something. I can't.
My guess is this: they already have 2.
Yeah.
They're having the 3rd. Probably was some kind of discussion that, hey, this is our last. Hopefully I get my boy. Well, it's a girl. It's your last.
Then he flies off the handle.
That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm guessing. But of course I don't know. Anyways, what's your next article?
I have one here that the title... Okay, let me just read it. 334-pound man sues Walt Disney World over injuries sustained on waterslide that allegedly didn't support his weight.
Okay.
A man was allegedly injured after an ill-fated trip down a water slide at Walt Disney World, and he's suing the theme park giant for $50,000 in damages, even though he was more than 30 pounds over the ride's weight limit at the time. In the lawsuit that was filed, Eugene Strickland claims that he's still struggling in the aftermath with catastrophic injuries that he sustained after riding a downhill double dipper at Disney's Blizzard Beach water park in July of 2021. At the time, Strickland weighed 334 pounds, according to the complaint, which put him just over the ride's 300-pound limit. It is unclear if he was warned about or aware of the weight limit before going down the slide. Strickland allegedly became momentarily airborne on the water slide before eventually landing with force onto the hard plastic surface of the slide after losing control of the inner tube that he was riding in, according to the complaint. The lawsuit pins blame on the water slide's design and exhilarating speeds, according to the complaint. Strickland asserts that he suffers serious bodily injury, pain, suffering, disability, etc., etc., etc. He's seeking $50,000 in damages. He claimed that Disney World was directly negligent for failing to establish safe premises and that it was well aware of the safety hazard and the, quote, concealed trap that the water slide presented. Okay.
Yeah, let me say this. Let me just say this. I agree with this guy.
What?
Go ahead.
No. You go ahead. Please explain. How do you agree?
Why do I agree with him?
Yes. I'd love to hear
Because one, when you go to these theme parks and you have kids, they measure them and make sure they meet the height requirement to go on these rides and whatever the case may be. Well, if there's a weight limit, why don't you weigh people to? I agree with this guy. They let him on. He's not the one that should be policing this. They're policing this. The teenagers they have there that are taking people height, it's not that difficult to get an electronic scale. As a matter of fact, what they should do is even make it more subtle. The final landing where you have to stand just before you go on the ride
should be a weight.
Make it an electronic scale that goes direct to the teenager's phone. So when they stand on there, boop, 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 get some kind of a beep on their phone. Oh, 333 pounds. I'm sorry, sir. You're over the weight limit of taking this ride. I agree with him.
Okay, so this actually, the reason I pulled this, I pulled this article is because it highlights a problem in our society. It's the fear of man, right? The ride operator would probably not be caught dead or even put himself in a position to be blamed as though he were fat shaming someone, asking for someone's weight before allowing them to go on the ride. So at the expense of this person's safety and the interest of political correctness.
Well, he should be fired.
Well, what if there's that culture of not stating the obvious, not checking the obvious in order to not offend your customers so that they come back and spend money at your theme park?
Was there clearly posted sign saying the weight limit?
Well, Disney World would always have. I don't mean to sound like I'm a corporate shill just kind of defending a corporation, but I frequented Walt Disney World a lot, let's just say, at least once a year, if not twice a year when I was a kid. There are signs posted everywhere about everything.
I'm still on this guy's side.
So all I'm saying is, what I'm really pointing at is we've created an environment, a cultural environment where you can't say offensive things, even if it's for the person's safety, even if it's for the person's good. You can't say offensive things. I would remind the listener, or just remind people, that not even 3 years ago, there was a 14-year-old boy who died on an attraction. It wasn't at Disney World. This was on one of the attractions on I-4, on an attraction because the safety mechanism on the ride could not engage because of his size and because of his weight. He was a very, very big boy, apparently played football, so he was the size of a man, like an NFL player, just a big, 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 big kid. And they let him on there anyway, and this mechanism failed and he fell to his death. I don't think that was negligence. Well, it was negligence in the sense that no one stopped him, but it wasn't like I forgot to check him. It was more like I don't think I want to say anything because it's not politically correct sort of thing. And I think that that's what's bonkers. The fact that we are not able to speak truth one to another any longer is bonkers.
Yeah, there's some aspect of where you should say, hey, I know I am 6 feet, 10 inches. I know I am 350 pounds. Let me not go on things that are meant for small people. I remember years ago, I don't know what happened of this, but Shaquille O'Neal, I don't know if he was being sued or he got in some little bit social hot water because, he's a jovial, joking kind of guy. And he will hit people. And to him, bump into people or whatever the case may be. And to him, he's a small little bump. But when you're 7'1", 7'2", 320 pounds or plus, and you're bumping into people with much smaller frame than you're probably hurting them more. You remember that scene in Incredibles when Mr. Incredible hit Frozone and said, just like the old time? And he said, yeah, it hurt back then too.
Don't know his own strength kind of thing.
Right,
yeah.
kind of thing. So maybe there was posted sign there, say 300-pound limit, and he know that he was over that and he still go on there. But at the same time, if McDonald's can be sued and lost because they serve hot coffee to someone who ordered hot coffee and they got burned.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Why is it that Disney shouldn't be sued? Because I think Disney should just settle and say, hey,
they will.
Here's $100,000 or whatever it is, go away and then implement what I say. Because what I'm saying is not hard to implement. Simply when they stand at that last area of just before they get onto the ride or slide or whatever the case may be, if you want to make it bold, pop it up so everybody could see. Or if you want to be discreet, let it pop up, flash on the iPad or something that the people can say, sorry, sir, you're a bit overweight for the ride. If you will sign this waiver, you can have the ride. Or if not, I'm sorry, you can't be on the ride. They do that for kids right now. If the kid is not tall enough, they say you can't go on the ride at certain roller coasters. If a slide has a weight limit,
Yeah.
Again, I'm sure you enjoyed the ride. You went airborne and everything, and probably was a general chiller.
Or maybe just make people sign a waiver at the point of purchase when they purchase their tickets that if they go on a ride and they are beyond the height limit or the weight limit or whatever, that they bear the sole responsibility for their injury, something along those lines. Practically, I don't see how you can have them sign a waiver before each ride because then, how do you get the name? How can you confirm their name? You got to go back and get your ID. And it's a water park, so no one's going to be carrying their ID on them. So it could be that whole thing, but perhaps that's what Disney needs to do. And I am not defending Disney because Disney is a multi-million, probably even multi-billion-dollar company. This is a drop in the bucket for them. It's a water spray for them. It's not a big deal. But at the same time, there needs to be a little bit of self-awareness, a little bit of introspection, a little bit of self-accountability to know that perhaps you shouldn't be riding a ride that you can't meet the weight limit for.
Yeah, still agreement with this guy. But anyways. Okay. All right, do you have any dishonorable mentions?
I just have one. The title is called Sanity Returns as Feds Condemn Transgender Treatments for Kids. I didn't bring this one up because we talked about how LGBTQ is wearing off and how companies are stepping back. Governments are beginning to stand up against the trans ideology. But it is just crazy that it took this long for them to realize that we shouldn't be transing the kids. So that's a dishonorable mention there.
All right. Well, I have a couple here. I think this happened in Switzerland. Stroke patient, here doctors discuss organ donation. So this man had a stroke, rushed to the hospital, and it seemed to be very bad. Brain was swollen and all this stuff, and they figured it either lost cause, but he could hear.
Wow.
And the doctors were standing over him discussing how they could donate his organs.
Wow.
Yep, that one is kind of what I can understand when people say, hey, my loved one's not going to be organ donors because these doctors like they're out for blood. But anyways.
Yikes.
Emmanuel Macron, wife, seen shoving him in the face in viral clips as France's first couple arrive in Vietnam. So some domestic abuse, I guess, they're going on in the French first couple. But anyways, I'll leave that as there. And then the last one I have, bride shocked as groom mysteriously vanished minutes after wedding. And she discovered his dark secret. And then she said he was the love of her life. What really happened, they have been shacking up for 5-6 years, I think, before they got married. Got married, and the day of the wedding, he vanished before they could go on their honeymoon. And she finally found out what happened is that he actually had another woman.
Oh, no.
So
why would you go through the whole wedding for some other woman when you already have another woman?
Well, he was having an affair, the article said, but whatever that means. But
okay. Yikes.
Well, anyways, as we always ask in this episode, do you agree with us? I know this question might be redundant, but do you agree with us? But if you agree with us, I must ask again, what are you doing about it? I will declare that this world has gone bonkers. And I will declare that, you know what, these many news articles that we have looked at show in some small way that we are dealing with some crazy folks out there. Some bonkers folks out there.
Yeah.
But what are you doing about it? I think the only thing that can turn around this is that we saturate our Jerusalem with the gospel of Jesus Christ. That we go and obey Mark 16:15, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And maybe we can bring back some sort of sanity to our country. Maybe we can somehow reverse the rapid rushing towards Acts chapter 17 culture. And maybe make it more of an Acts chapter 2, even better yet, a biblically Christian culture where people know the true God of creation and his son, Jesus Christ.
This is the Removing Barriers podcast. If the podcast or the blog were a blessing to you, leave us a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to share the podcast with your friends. Removing Barriers, a clear view of the cross.
Thank you for listening. To get a hold of us, to support this podcast, or to learn more about Removing Barriers, go to removingbarriers.net. This has been the Removing Barriers podcast. We attempted to remove barriers so that we all can have a clear view of the cross.